Rodman friends, it's Mrs. Kilday here. The sun is outside and it's springtime, and I know we're learning about spring, so I decided to do our story outside today. This is a great story called The Best Nest by P.D. Eastman. Can you hear the birds? Mr. Bird was so happy. He was so happy he had to sing, and this was Mr. Bird's song. I love my house, I love my nest, in all the world, my nest is best. Hey, nest, best rhymes. See, here's Mr. Bird. Ooh, this is Mrs. Bird. Mrs. Bird came out of the house. It is not the best nest, she said. Look at her arms are crossed. She is angry. Poor Mr. Bird. He must be surprised. Look at her. She is pointing her wing at him. I'm tired of this old place, said Mrs. Bird. I hate it. Let's look for a new place right now. So they left the old place to look for a new one. This place looks nice, said Mr. Bird. Let's move right in here. But somebody else already lived there, a raccoon. So they looked at another house. Does this look like a house to you? This one looks nice, said Mr. Bird, and there's nobody in it. Oh, you're wrong, said Mrs. Bird. This house belongs to a foot. So they went on looking. I like this one, said Mr. Bird. It has a pretty red flag on that roof. I've always wanted a house with a red flag, said Mrs. Bird. Maybe this place will be all right. Do you know what this is? It's a mailbox. Do you think a mailbox is a good house for a bird? Oh, I don't think so. But it was not all right. I guess I made a mistake, said Mr. Bird. You make too many mistakes, said Mrs. Bird. I am going to pick the next house. And here it is, right here. They flew in and looked around. Isn't it too big? Asked Mr. Bird. I like this big place, said Mrs. Bird. This is the place to build our new nest. They went right to work. They needed many things to build their nest. First, they got some hay. They got some soda straws and some broom straws. They got some sweater string. Look at his face and you'll know how he feels. Surprised. They got some stocking string and mattress stuffing. They got some horse hair. They got some man hair. Soon they had all the hay, all the straw, all the string, all the stuffing, all the horse hair, and all the man hair they could carry. They took it all back to build their nest. Mr. and Mrs. Bird worked very hard. It took them the rest of the morning to finish that nest. This nest really is the best, said Mrs. Bird. I want to stay here forever. She looks happy. Mr. Bird was happy too. He flew to the top of his house and sang his song again. I love our house, I love our nest. In all the world, our nest is best. He was so busy singing, he didn't even see Mr. Parker coming. What do you think is going to happen? Well, every day at 12 o'clock, Mr. Parker came to the church. He came to pull a rope, and that rope went up, up, up to the bird's new nest. Wonder what that rope was attached to. Uh-oh. That rope rang the big bell right under Mrs. Bird's nest. Oh my goodness. It's shaking. Bong, bong. Oh, brother. Mrs. Bird got out of there as fast as she could fly. But when Mr. Bird came in, all he could see was a big mess of hay and string and stuffing and horsehair and man hair and straws. Where was Mrs. Bird? I will look for her until I find her, said Mr. Bird. He looked high, he looked low, he looked everywhere for Mrs. Bird. He looked down into a chimney. Mrs. Bird was not there. He looked down into a water barrel. Mrs. Bird was not there. Then he saw a big fat cat. There was a big fat smile on that fat cat's face, and there was some pretty brown feathers near that fat cat's mouth. Mr. Bird began to cry. "Oh dear," he cried. "That big fat cat has eaten Mrs. Bird." He flew off. I'll never see her again. It was getting dark, and it began to rain. It rained harder and harder. Mr. Bird really couldn't see where he was going. Crash! He bumped into something. It was his old house, that old house that Mrs. Bird hated. Remember from the beginning? "I'll go inside," said Mr. Bird. "I'll rest until the rain stops." Mr. Bird went in. There was Mrs. Bird sitting there singing. "I love my house, I love my nest, in all the world my nest is best." "You? Here?" gasped Mr. Bird. "I thought you hated this old nest." Mrs. Bird smiled. "I used to hate it," she said, "but a mommy bird can change her mind. You see, there's no nest like an old nest for a brand new bird. They have an egg in their nest. And when that egg popped open, this new little bird thought so too. It's a good time of year to see a lot of birds. I see birds in my yard all around finding things to build nests, and I'm wondering if they'll have eggs in their nests. Keep your eyes out for those birds, friends. Bye.